A civilian liability. Is that what you called her? Captain Ramirez sneered, looking directly at Commander Brooks, who stood frozen in shock. The emergency response team watched in disbelief as Dr. Elena Kaminski, the woman they had just refused access to the bomb site, walked calmly out of the building holding the defused device in her gloved hands. Her eyes, tired but focused, held no trace of resentment, only quiet determination as she handed over the evidence that would save countless lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 hours earlier, the Joint Counter-Terrorism Task Force headquarters buzzed with controlled chaos. Screens displayed real-time updates from the downtown financial district, where an explosive device had been discovered in the basement of Meridian Tower, a 60-story building housing over 4,000 employees and visitors on a typical Monday morning. Commander James Brooks, 52, with salt and pepper hair and 25 years of military experience, stood at the center of operations, barking orders with practiced authority. We have less than 4 hours before this thing potentially detonates. I want a 5-block evacuation zone established now. EOD Team Alpha is en route and will have primary responsibility for device assessment and neutralization. All other personnel maintain perimeter control and evacuation assistance. Brooks looked around the room with stern confidence, his team responding with coordinated precision. Among those gathered at the periphery of the command center stood Elena Kaminski, 42, dressed in modest civilian attire. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. Nothing about her appearance suggested her exceptional expertise. She stood quietly, observing the operational screens with focused attention, occasionally making notes on a small pad. Several officers glanced at her with curiosity, unsure why a civilian was present during an active threat response. Elena approached Commander Brooks cautiously, aware that interrupting the chain of command during a crisis was generally unwelcome. She had been invited to the center that morning for a routine consultation on an unrelated matter, but the emergency had disrupted those plans. Now she found herself with critical information that might help if only someone would listen. "Commander Brooks," Elena began, her voice calm but firm. "I believe I can provide some assistance with this device. Based on the preliminary images, this appears to be a modified Savoska mechanism, similar to devices I analyzed during my work with international recovery operations." Brooks barely glanced at her, continuing to review tactical plans with his team. "Miss Kaminski, this is an active military operation. We have trained EOD specialists en route. Your expertise, while appreciated in academic settings, is not required here. Please remain clear of operational areas." "Actually, it's Dr. Kaminski," she corrected gently. "And I understand your protocols, but the Savoska configuration has a distinctive sequential trigger system that standard EOD approaches might inadvertently activate. I have direct experience with this specific design." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who stood nearby coordinating communications, looked up with interest, but Brooks waved dismissively. "Doctor, civilian contractor, whatever. This is not a classroom or a lab. This is an actual explosive device threatening thousands of lives. My team trains for exactly these scenarios. Now please step back and let us do our jobs." Brooks turned away, effectively ending the conversation. Elena remained where she stood, her expression unchanged except for a slight tightening around her eyes. She had encountered this attitude before, the dismissal of expertise that didn't come with a uniform or fit the expected profile. She made no further attempt to interject, instead watching as the operation unfolded, noting each decision with growing concern. The EOD team arrived at Meridian Tower 20 minutes later, led by Captain Maria Ramirez an experienced explosives expert with multiple tours in conflict zones. The initial assessment was transmitted back to command in real time, showing a complex device with unfamiliar components. "Sir, this is unlike standard configurations we've encountered," Ramirez reported through the COM system. "Multiple trigger mechanisms, possibly with anti-tampering features. We're proceeding with caution, but this will take time to properly analyze." Elena, still positioned at the edge of the command center, studied the incoming visual feed intently. Her eyes widened slightly as the camera panned across specific components. She approached Brooks again, more urgently this time. "Commander, that's definitely a Savoska variant. See the blue wire configuration and the secondary timing circuit. The standard disarming sequence will trigger the backup detonator. I've neutralized 3 of these exact devices during my time with the International Security Consortium." Brooks turned to her with visible irritation. "Dr. Kaminski, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is not the time for civilian input. Captain Ramirez is one of our most experienced EOD specialists. She knows what she's doing." Elena persisted, her voice calm but insistent. "Commander, with all due respect to Captain Ramirez and her team, the specific configuration requires specialized knowledge. The creator of these devices intentionally designs them to counter standard military EOD procedures. I've studied his methodology extensively." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped closer. "Sir, maybe we should at least hear what Dr. Kaminski has to say. If she has specific experience with this type of device." "That's enough, Lieutenant," Brooks snapped. "We follow protocol and trust our trained personnel. Ms. Kaminski, this is your final warning to step back from operational matters. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Elena stepped back, recognizing the futility of pushing further against such entrenched resistance. She watched as Captain Ramirez and her team continued their careful analysis of the device, knowing they were missing critical indicators that would only become apparent to them too late. 50 minutes later, tension in the command center spiked as Captain Ramirez's voice came through with alarming news. "Command, we've identified multiple trigger mechanisms, but can't determine the primary circuit. Attempting to isolate power sources has revealed what appears to be a countdown acceleration feature. Any intrusion into the main housing triggers a timer reduction. We currently estimate less than 40 minutes remaining before detonation." Brooks's expression hardened as he processed this development. "Ramirez, what's your assessment? Can your team neutralize in time?" There was a moment of hesitation before Ramirez responded. "Sir, I'm not confident we can safely disarm this with standard procedures in the available time frame. This device has features I haven't encountered before. The design appears specifically engineered to counter our protocols." Brooks turned to his tactical officer. "What's our evacuation status?" "Approximately 75% complete for the immediate zone." "Sir, but we can't guarantee full clearance of the extended damage radius in the remaining time. We're looking at potential casualties in the hundreds if detonation occurs." Elena moved forward again, no longer willing to remain silent with lives at stake. "Commander Brooks, I can help. I know this bomb maker's methodology and have successfully neutralized his devices before. Please, let me speak directly with Captain Ramirez." Brooks glared at her, but before he could respond, Lieutenant Rodriguez interjected. "Sir, with all due respect, if Dr. Kaminski has specific expertise with this exact type of device, we should utilize that resource. We're running out of options and time." For several tense seconds, Brooks seemed to be weighing his options, pride battling against pragmatism. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Put her on the come with Ramirez. But make it clear this is consultative only. Ramirez retains operational control." Elena was quickly connected to the EOD team's communication channel. Captain Ramirez, this is Dr. Elena Kaminski. I've worked extensively with Savoska-type devices through the International Security Consortium. Based on what I'm seeing in your video feed, this is almost certainly the work of Anton Savoska himself. Go ahead, Dr. Kaminski, Ramirez responded, her tone professional despite the pressure. I'm open to any insights you can provide. Elena spoke clearly and methodically. The blue wire cluster connected to the timer isn't the primary circuit. It's a decoy designed to accelerate detonation if cut. The actual disarming sequence requires accessing the secondary control board beneath the main timer display. However, the housing is booby-trapped with pressure sensors. I see the housing you're referring to, Ramirez confirmed. How do you suggest we proceed? Elena continued with precise instructions, describing a specific sequence of steps that would bypass the anti-tampering measures. As she spoke, Commander Brooks watched with a mixture of skepticism and grudging interest. Lieutenant Rodriguez monitored the exchange closely, occasionally glancing at Brooks with questioning eyes. After several minutes of detailed technical discussion, Captain Ramirez's voice came through with obvious concern. Dr. Kaminski, what you're suggesting contradicts our standard protocols. If you're wrong about this being a Savoska device, I understand your hesitation, Captain, Elena replied calmly. But I've personally disarmed 3 of his devices during operations in Eastern Europe and identified his signature components in 12 others. The pattern is consistent. Standard EOD approaches trigger his backup systems. There was a moment of silence before Ramirez responded. Command, requesting permission to follow Dr. Kaminski's guidance. Our standard approach isn't getting us anywhere. And time is critical. Brooks's jaw tightened visibly as he considered the request. His instinct was to trust his trained personnel, to follow established protocols. But the clock was ticking down, and Ramirez herself was requesting the civilians' input. Permission granted, Brooks finally stated, his voice tight. But Ramirez, you maintain final authority. If anything seems off, you abort and withdraw immediately. Understood, sir, Ramirez acknowledged. For the next 20 minutes, the command center remained in tense silence as Elena guided Ramirez through a complex disarming sequence. Each step was methodical, with Elena explaining not just what to do, but why it was necessary, demonstrating a depth of knowledge that even Brooks couldn't dismiss. Almost there, Captain, Elena encouraged as Ramirez carefully manipulated components according to her instructions. Once you've isolated that green circuit board, you'll see a small silver cylinder with copper contacts. That's the master arming switch disguised as a capacitor. It needs to be rotated counterclockwise exactly 3/4 turn, then removed. I see it, Ramirez confirmed. Proceeding now. Moments later, Ramirez's voice returned with audible relief. The timer has stopped, and the indicator lights have powered down. I believe the device is neutralized. Conducting final safety checks now. A collective exhale swept through the command center. Lieutenant Rodriguez smiled at Elena, who remained focused on the screen, watching as Ramirez's team completed their verification procedures. Devices confirmed neutralized, Ramirez finally reported. Dr. Kaminski, your guidance was spot on. This device had features I've never encountered in training or field operations. Thank you. Elena nodded, though Ramirez couldn't see her. You're welcome, Captain. Savoska's work is deliberately designed to counter military EOD training. He studies your protocols and builds in countermeasures specifically. Brooks approached Elena, his expression a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering defensiveness. Dr. Kaminski, it appears we owe you our thanks. Your expertise proved valuable today. Elena met his gaze evenly. I'm just glad I could help, Commander. Perhaps this might encourage a more collaborative approach between military and civilian experts in the future. These threats don't recognize Our organizational boundaries. Before Brooks could respond, Lieutenant Rodriguez interrupted with urgency in his voice. Sir, update from perimeter team. They've discovered what appears to be a second device in the East Wing service corridor. Initial assessment suggests similar construction, but potentially larger payload. Brooks immediately returned to command mode. Ramirez, what's your team's status? We're securing the neutralized device now, sir. We can redeploy to the second location in approximately 15 minutes. That might be too late, Rodriguez interjected, checking incoming data. Preliminary readings suggest this second device may be on a shorter timer. Brooks turned to Elena, visible conflict on his face as he wrestled with his next decision. His training and experience told him to follow protocol, to wait for his EOD team. But lives were at stake, and this civilian had just proven her expertise. Beyond question, Dr. Kaminski, he began, his tone more respectful than before. Would you be willing to provide guidance on this second device as well? Elena was already gathering her things. Actually, Commander, given the time constraints, I believe I should go to the site directly. I can assess and potentially neutralize the device more quickly without having to guide someone else through the process remotely. Absolutely not, Brooks responded immediately. You're a civilian consultant. I cannot authorize you to directly handle an explosive device. That contradicts every protocol we have. Elena regarded him steadily. Commander, you have two options. Wait for Captain Ramirez's team and hope they arrive in time, or let me go now. I've physically neutralized Savoska devices before. This is quite literally my area of expertise. Lieutenant. Rodriguez looked between them, then spoke up. Sir, she just talked Captain Ramirez through a successful disarming procedure that none of our people recognized. If the second device is on a shorter timer. Brooks cut him off with a sharp gesture, visibly struggling with the decision. This contradicts all standard operating procedures, he muttered, more to himself than to the others. Sometimes the situation demands we go beyond standard procedures, Elena said quietly. Isn't saving lives the ultimate protocol? For several agonizing seconds, Brooks stared at her, weighing his options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Rodriguez, arrange immediate transport for Dr. Kaminski to the East Wing entry point. Provide her with basic protective gear. She is to be accompanied by security personnel at all times, but given operational latitude regarding the device itself. Thank you, Commander, Elena said simply, showing no triumph or vindication in her manner. As she was escorted from the command center, Brooks called after her, Dr. Kaminski, this doesn't mean I'm comfortable with civilians in operational roles. This is an extreme exception due to time constraints. Elena paused briefly at the door. Understood, Commander. Sometimes expertise comes in unexpected packages. I'll be in radio contact once I reach the site. Within minutes, Elena was being transported to Meridian Tower, equipped with basic protective gear that seemed almost comically oversized on her slight frame. The security team accompanying her maintained professional composure, but their sideways glances betrayed their uncertainty about escorting a civilian directly to an active explosive device. Upon arrival at the East Wing, Elena was briefed by the on-site security leader, Sergeant Garcia. The device was located in a service corridor near the building's electrical control room, suggesting the bomber had targeted critical infrastructure. We've established a perimeter and evacuated all personnel from this section, Dr. Kaminski, Garcia explained. Captain Ramirez and her team are still securing the first device, but are preparing to move here as quickly as possible. Elena nodded, her focus already on the task ahead. Let me see what we're dealing with. Approaching the device with careful, measured movements, Elena immediately recognized the signature components of Anton Savoska's work. This device was indeed similar to the first, but with concerning modifications that suggested it was designed as a secondary failsafe, meant to detonate if the primary device was successfully neutralized. Garcia's radio crackled with Commander Brooks's voice. "What's the status there, Sergeant?" "Dr. Kaminski is examining the device now, sir," Garcia reported, awaiting her assessment. Elena knelt beside the device, her trained eye cataloging its components and likely trigger mechanisms. She activated her own radio. "Commander, this is definitely another Savoska device, but with modifications. It appears to be a secondary failsafe, possibly triggered by the successful disarming of the first device. The timer indicates 26 minutes remaining, but I suspect that's deliberately misleading. Based on the power configuration, we may have less than 15. Can you neutralize it?" Brooks asked, his earlier resistance noticeably diminished. "Yes," Elena replied with quiet confidence, "but I'll need to work directly with it. The disarming sequence is more complex than the first, and would be difficult to talk someone else through remotely." There was a brief pause before Brooks responded. "Understood. Proceed as you see fit. Dr. Kaminski, Ramirez's team is still 10 minutes out at minimum." Elena looked at Sergeant Garcia. "I need some space to work. Please maintain the perimeter, but give me room to concentrate." Garcia nodded, stepping back and directing his team to maintain positions at a safe distance while remaining ready to assist if needed. Alone with the device, Elena carefully removed specialized tools from her pocket, items she always carried, remnants of a past life that most people, including Commander Brooks, knew nothing about. Her movements were precise, methodical, betraying years of experience that went far beyond the academic expertise suggested by her title. As she worked, Elena maintained calm radio contact with the command center, providing updates without distraction. Each step she took was deliberate, countering the intricate failsafes and traps built into Savoska's design, where military E-aid teams were trained to follow specific protocols. Elena understood the psychology behind this particular bomb maker's methodology, his desire to outwit conventional approaches, his need to demonstrate superiority through complexity. Time seemed to compress as Elena navigated the device's internal mechanisms. Her focus was absolute, hands steady despite the pressure. In the command center, Brooks and his team watched through a body camera they had provided her, many of them holding their breath as she manipulated wires and components that could end dozens of lives in an instant. "Almost there," Elena reported, her voice betraying no hint of the tension the others felt. "The primary trigger has been isolated. Now addressing the secondary system." Brooks watched the feed intently, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by focused attention. This woman, whom he had dismissed as a civilian liability just hours earlier, was demonstrating skill and composure that rivaled his most experienced operators. 3 minutes later, Elena's voice came through with quiet certainty. "Device neutralized. All trigger mechanisms have been disabled and power sources disconnected. The explosive material is stable and can now be safely removed by Captain Ramirez's team when they arrive." The command center erupted in relieved exclamations and applause. Lieutenant Rodriguez clapped a hand on Brooks's shoulder, a grin spreading across his face. "She did it, sir." Brooks nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yes, she certainly did." As the security team moved back in to secure the area, Elena carefully packed her tools away. She stood slowly, the adrenaline that had sustained her focus beginning to ebb, leaving fatigue in its wake. She had done what she came to do, saved lives that might have been lost had protocol and hierarchy prevented her intervention. Captain Ramirez and her EOD team arrived minutes later, quickly taking control of the neutralized device. Ramirez approached Elena with undisguised respect. "Dr. Kaminski, that was remarkable work. I've never seen anyone handle a device of that complexity with such precision. Where did you learn those techniques?" Elena smiled slightly. "That's a long story, Captain. Perhaps another time." As they secured the scene, Commander Brooks arrived in person, having left the command center once. The immediate threat was neutralized. He approached Elena directly, his earlier dismissive attitude nowhere in evidence. "Dr. Kaminski," he began, then paused, seeming to recalibrate his approach. "Elena, what you did today saved lives. Many lives. I owe you an apology for my earlier skepticism." Elena regarded him steadily. "We all have our areas of expertise, Commander. I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time." Brooks hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming in his mind since watching her. "Work. Your familiarity with these devices, your technique. That goes beyond academic research or occasional consultation. Who are you really, Dr. Kaminski?" "A civilian liability, apparently," Elena replied with the faintest hint of a smile, echoing his earlier dismissal. Then, more seriously, "My background is complicated, Commander. Let's just say that before I was Dr. Kaminski, the academic consultant, I had another life with another title. One that involved more fieldwork and less paperwork." Before Brooks could press further, Captain Ramirez approached with urgent news. "Sir, preliminary analysis of the devices confirms they match the signature of the Caracas embassy bombing 3 months ago. This is definitely Savoska's work, and he's escalating his targets." Elena's expression sharpened with interest. "You have confirmation it's Savoska?" Ramirez nodded. "Components match his known signature. Intelligence has been tracking him for years, but he's remained elusive." Brooks looked between them, making a decision. "Dr. Kaminski, given your expertise with this bomber's methodology, I'd like to formally request your assistance with our ongoing investigation. This clearly goes beyond today's incident." "I'd be happy to help, Commander," Elena replied. "In fact, I might have insights about Savoska that would interest your intelligence team. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more appropriate." As they prepared to depart, Elena took one last look at the neutralized device being carefully packed for transport and analysis. Few people would ever know how close the city had come to tragedy today, or how conventional protocol might have failed had she not been present and recognized. Lieutenant Rodriguez approached as they were leaving. "Dr. Kaminski, that was incredible work. I've never seen Commander Brooks change his mind so completely about anything or anyone." Elena smiled. "Sometimes expertise comes from unexpected sources, Lieutenant. The uniform doesn't make the expert, and the expert doesn't always wear a uniform." 3 hours after first being dismissed as a civilian liability, Elena walked out of Meridian Tower alongside Commander Brooks and Captain Ramirez, their body language now reflecting a newfound professional respect. The crisis had been averted. Lives had been saved, and perceptions had been permanently altered. As they reached the command vehicles, Brooks turned to Elena with a question that had been nagging at him. "You knew exactly what you were doing with those devices. You knew Savoska's work intimately. Why were you so calm about being initially dismissed?" Most experts would have been more insistent. Elena considered him for a moment before answering. "When you've spent years being underestimated because you don't fit people's expectations of what an expert looks like, you develop patience. Today wasn't about proving myself right, Commander. It was about preventing tragedy. The rest is just ego, and ego has no place when lives are at stake." Brooks nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Well, I can assure you, Dr. Kaminski, you won't be underestimated by this team again." Elena's response was simple, her eyes meeting his with quiet intensity. "Good, because I have a feeling Savoska isn't finished, and next time, we might not have the luxury of overcoming skepticism before addressing the threat." The weight of her words settled over them as they prepared to return to headquarters, all of them now aware that the day's events were likely just the opening move in a larger, more dangerous game. A game where expertise, regardless of its source, might make the difference between disaster and salvation. Few people knew the real story behind Dr. Elena Kaminski. To most who encountered her at the university where she taught engineering ethics and conflict resolution, she was simply a brilliant academic with a quiet demeanor and meticulous attention to detail. Her students found her knowledgeable but somewhat reserved, always willing to help but maintaining a professional distance that few managed to bridge. Colleagues respected her published works on improvised explosive devices in conflict zones, attributing her expertise to thorough research and academic rigor rather than first-hand experience. Elena's modest one-bedroom apartment reflected her outward persona, organized, functional, and deliberately unremarkable. Books on engineering, physics, and international security lined the shelves, interspersed with framed diplomas and academic awards. Nothing in this carefully curated public image hinted at the life she had lived before academia claimed her, or the skills she had demonstrated at Meridian Tower. The truth, which Commander Brooks was now beginning to suspect, was far more complex. Before she was Dr. Elena Kaminski, professor and occasional government consultant, she had been Operative Kaminski, one of the International Security Consortium's most effective field specialists in explosive ordnance identification and neutralization. For 12 years, Elena had worked in some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones, directly confronting the deadly innovations of bomb makers like Anton Savoska. Elena had never sought recognition for this work. In fact, her transition to academic life had been partly motivated by a desire for anonymity after a particularly harrowing operation in Eastern Europe that had left physical and emotional scars she preferred not to discuss. She had channeled her expertise into research and teaching, finding purpose in educating the next generation while occasionally lending her knowledge to government agencies through carefully limited consultations. The morning after the Meridian Tower incident, Elena arrived at her university office as usual, nothing in her demeanor suggesting she had saved countless lives the day before. She sorted through emails, prepared materials for her afternoon lecture, and responded to student queries with her customary patience and precision. If she was tired from the previous day's tension, she didn't show it. At precisely 10:17 a.m., a knock at her office door interrupted her routine. Elena looked up to find Lieutenant Ramirez standing in the doorway, his military bearing slightly at odds with the academic environment. "Dr. Kaminski," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "Commander Brooks has requested your presence at Task Force headquarters for a briefing on yesterday's incident and potential follow-up consultations. If you're available, of course." Elena regarded him thoughtfully. She had expected this. The questions her performance yesterday would inevitably raise, the interest her expertise would generate. She had deliberately maintained a low profile for years, but circumstances had forced her hand. Now she would need to navigate the consequences of that exposure. "I have a lecture at 2, Lieutenant," she replied, closing her laptop. "But I'm available until then." As Ramirez escorted her to a waiting vehicle, Elena observed the subtle shift in his manner compared to their first encounter. Yesterday, he had seen her as a civilian interloper, albeit one whose input he had been willing to consider. Today, there was unmistakable respect in his bearing, the kind reserved for proven professionals. The journey to Task Force headquarters was completed in comfortable silence. Elena used the time to mentally prepare for the questions that would come, deciding how much of her background she was willing to reveal and what boundaries she would maintain. Her prior life wasn't exactly classified, but it wasn't information she shared freely either. Commander Brooks met them in the secure briefing room, along with Captain Ramirez and several intelligence analysts Elena hadn't met previously. Atmosphere was markedly different from the previous day. Gone was the skepticism and territorial defensiveness, replaced by professional curiosity and cautious respect. "Dr. Kaminski, thank you for joining us," Brooks began, gesturing toward an empty chair at the conference table. "We've been analyzing the devices you helped neutralize yesterday." Our technical team confirms they are definitely Savoska's work, with several innovations we haven't seen in his previous devices. Elena nodded, unsurprised. Savoska evolves his methodology constantly. It's part of what makes him so dangerous. He learns from each deployment, adapting to counter the techniques used against his previous devices. One of the intelligence analysts, a sharp-eyed woman introduced as Agent Torres, leaned forward with interest. "You speak as if you know him personally, Dr. Kaminski." "Not personally, no," Elena replied carefully. "But I've studied his work extensively. Each bomb maker has distinctive patterns, preferences, a kind of signature. Savoska's is particularly sophisticated." Brooks exchanged glances with Torres before continuing. "Your familiarity with his methods goes well beyond academic study. Dr. Kaminski, the techniques you employed yesterday were not documented in any of our EOD manuals or training protocols." Elena met his gaze steadily, recognizing the implied question. "Before my academic career, I worked with the International Security Consortium's Field Operations Division. My specialization was identification and neutralization of complex explosive devices in conflict zones." "The ISC," Ramirez repeated, recognition flickering in her eyes. "They're a semi-autonomous international organization that operates in partnership with UN peacekeeping, but maintains independent operational capability, highly selective recruitment, extensive field training." "That's correct," Elena confirmed. "I was with them for 12 years, primarily in Eastern Europe and parts of Asia where Savoska and others like him were active." Brooks studied her with new understanding. "And you left that work for academia? May I ask why?" Elena considered how much to share. The full story involved a failed operation, civilian casualties, and injuries that had left her with limited mobility for nearly a year. It was the kind of experience that changed perspectives permanently. "Let's just say I reached a point where I felt I could contribute more by educating others than by continuing in the field," she answered diplomatically. "The ISC operates with limited visibility by design. My research and teaching allows me to share critical knowledge more broadly." Brooks seemed to recognize her deflection but didn't press further. Instead, he turned to the matter at hand. "We believe yesterday's devices were part of a larger coordinated effort. Intelligence suggests Savoska has been contracted by an as-yet unidentified terror cell with significant resources and domestic targets." The briefing continued with Torres presenting intelligence on recent movements and materials acquisitions potentially linked to Savoska. Elena listened attentively, occasionally offering insights based on her experience with his previous work. The level of detail in the intelligence reports was impressive, but Elena noted several gaps in their understanding of Savoska's methodology and likely targeting priorities. As the formal briefing concluded, Brooks addressed Elena directly. "Dr. Kaminski, given your unique expertise with Savoska's work, we'd like to bring you on as a special consultant to this task force. Your academic commitments would be accommodated, of course, but we need your insights as we track and counter this threat." Elena had anticipated this request and had already considered her response. "I'm willing to consult on device identification and neutralization techniques, Commander. I can also review your intelligence assessments related to Savoska's methodology and likely targets. However, I need to be clear about my boundaries. I'm no longer a field operative." "Of course," Brooks agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly. "We're simply looking for your expertise in an advisory capacity. Your experience could save lives." Elena nodded, recognizing the sincerity in his statement, even as she suspected he might hope for more than advisory input as the situation developed. It was a dynamic she had encountered before, the gradual expansion of a consultant's role when their expertise proved valuable. "I'll need access to all your intelligence on Savoska's recent activities and any recovered components from previous devices attributed to him," she stated, establishing her requirements. and I'd like Captain Ramirez involved in any technical discussions. Her team's field perspective will be valuable." Ramirez looked surprised but pleased at the inclusion. Brooks agreed readily, instructing Torres to arrange the necessary security clearances and access permissions. As the meeting dispersed, Brooks asked Elena to remain behind for a moment. When they were alone, his professional demeanor softened. "Slightly. I owe you a more formal apology for yesterday. Dr. Kaminski, my dismissal of your expertise was unprofessional and, as events proved, dangerously misguided." Elena appreciated the directness of his acknowledgement. "We all have our blind spots, Commander. Military and security operations tend to foster certain hierarchies and expectations. I didn't fit the profile you're accustomed to trusting in crisis situations." Brooks considered this. "It's more than that, though, isn't it? You deliberately maintain a low profile. Your university biography mentions nothing about your ISC work. Your published papers cite field research, but never clarify that you personally conducted that research in active conflict zones." Elena smiled. "Slightly. Would it have made a difference yesterday if my university bio had mentioned my previous career?" Brooks had the grace to look slightly abashed. Point taken. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock. Lieutenant Rodriguez entered without waiting for a response, his expression tense. "Sir, we've just received intelligence about unusual material purchases matching Savoska's typical acquisition patterns. Location is approximately 30 miles north of the city." Brooks immediately shifted back to command mode. "Get the tactical team prepped. I want surveillance in place within the hour." He turned to Elena. "Dr. Kaminski, I know you said advisory only, but would you be willing to review this intelligence immediately? Your insight could help us determine if this is indeed Savoska preparing another device." Elena nodded, setting aside her earlier reservations. This was precisely why she had agreed to consult, to prevent another Meridian Tower scenario, or worse. She followed Brooks and Rodriguez to the operations center, where satellite imagery and purchase records were already being compiled and analyzed. For the next several hours, Elena worked alongside the intelligence team, identifying patterns consistent with Savoska's methods and highlighting concerns about specific chemical compounds among the purchases. Her lecture was postponed with a quick call to the department secretary, her academic life temporarily receding as she immersed herself in the familiar work of tracking a bomb maker's preparations. By evening, the task force had established surveillance on a warehouse complex where intelligence suggested Savoska or his associates might be operating. Elena studied the architectural plans of the buildings, identifying potential locations where device assembly would most likely occur based on specific requirements like ventilation, power access, and limited foot traffic. As the surveillance team reported back with thermal imaging showing activity in exactly the areas Elena had indicated, Brooks glanced at her with undisguised admiration. "Your analytical skills are remarkable. This would have taken us days to narrow down without your input." Elena shrugged slightly. "It's pattern recognition based on experience. Savoska has specific environmental requirements for his work. He's meticulous about certain conditions." As midnight approached, Elena finally prepared to leave, having provided all the insights she could based on the available intelligence. Brooks walked her to the exit, their professional relationship already transformed from the previous day's antagonism. "We'll continue monitoring the situation overnight," he assured her. "If anything develops, would it be appropriate to contact you, regardless of the hour?" "Yes," Elena agreed. "This is Savoska we're dealing with. Time can be critical with his devices." As she turned to leave, Brooks asked the question that had clearly been on his mind throughout the day's collaboration. "The officials at ISC do they know you're consulting with us?" "I understand their operations and personnel details are closely guarded." Elena considered her answer carefully. My separation from field operations was amicable, Commander. There's no conflict in my advisory role here. But no, they don't track my current activities, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. Brooks nodded, accepting her boundary without further question. The respect she had earned through her actions spoke louder than any credentials could have. Elena returned to her apartment late that night, her mind still processing the day's developments. After years of deliberately stepping back from the kind of work that had once defined her life, she found herself drawn back into the hunt for a bomb maker whose methods she understood better than most. The familiar patterns of analysis and strategic thinking had returned easily, as if she had never left that world behind. As she prepared for bed, Elena's phone chimed with a message, an encrypted communication on a channel she hadn't used in years. She stared at the notification, momentarily frozen by its implications. Only a handful of people had access to this particular secure channel, all of them from her previous life with the ISC. With slight hesitation, she opened the message. Whisper, your expertise has been noticed again. Phoenix sends regards and caution. Old ghosts never truly disappear. Elena sat heavily on the edge of her bed, the message confirming what part of her had suspected since the moment she had decided to intervene at Meridian Tower. Her former IC handler, codenamed Phoenix, was aware of her involvement. The carefully constructed separation between her past and present was beginning to erode. She typed a brief response. Necessity dictated involvement. Situation contained. Advisory capacity only. The reply came almost immediately. Savoska. Is not a coincidence. History repeating. Watch your back. Elena stared at the cryptic warning, her mind racing through implications. Her last field operation with the ISC had involved Savoska's network, a mission that had ended with casualties and her own injuries. If Phoenix was suggesting a connection between those events and the current threat, the situation was far more complex than Commander Brooks and his task force realized. She considered contacting Brooks immediately with this new information, but hesitated. Her relationship with the ISC and the details of that final mission remained closely guarded for good reasons. Revealing those connections prematurely might compromise ongoing IC operations or, worse, alert Savoska if he had infiltrated any part of the local security apparatus. Instead, Elena sent one final message to Phoenix. Need more information. Secure meeting? The response was typically concise. Tomorrow, usual protocols. 1400 hours. Elena deleted the conversation and set the phone aside, knowing she would need to carefully balance her commitment to Brooks' task force with the sensitive information she might receive from her former handler. She had agreed to serve as a consultant, to lend her expertise in identifying and neutralizing Savoska's devices. She had not agreed to become entangled again in the shadowy world of international security operations she had deliberately left behind. As she finally settled into bed, Elena reflected on the irony of her situation. Just 2 days ago, she had been dismissed as a civilian liability, her expertise ignored by those who couldn't see past her unassuming appearance and academic title. Now she found herself pulled between multiple worlds, the university where she had built a new identity, the task force that suddenly valued her insights, and the secretive organization from her past that seemed to have its own agenda regarding Savoska. The challenge ahead would require more than just her technical knowledge of explosive devices. It would demand all the strategic thinking and situational awareness she had developed during her years in the field, skills she had hoped never to need again. And it would test her ability to navigate complex allegiances while staying true to her core purpose, preventing harm to innocent lives, regardless of institutional boundaries or protocols. As sleep finally claimed her, Elena's last conscious thought was a familiar mantra from her field training days. Expertise is worthless unless applied at the critical moment, regardless of who recognizes its value. Yesterday at Meridian Tower had been such a moment. Tomorrow would likely bring another. Dawn broke with a clarity that seemed at odds with the complexities Elena now faced. She rose early, completing her usual morning routine with deliberate focus. Teaching her scheduled morning class provided a welcome return to normalcy, the familiar rhythm of academic discourse, temporarily displacing thoughts of bomb makers and secret messages. As her students filed out after the lecture, one lingered behind, Aisha Khan, a promising graduate student whose thesis on post-conflict infrastructure security Elena was supervising. Aisha approached with visible hesitation. Dr. Kaminski. She began carefully. I saw you on the news yesterday. They didn't mention you by name, but I recognized you in the background footage from Meridian Tower. Were you involved with the bomb threat response? Elena maintained her professional composure, cursing inwardly at the media coverage she had hoped to avoid. The official press release had focused on the successful EOD operation without naming civilian consultants, but apparently the cameras had captured her presence. I provided some technical consultation, Elena acknowledged minimally. It's related to my previous research work. Aisha's expression suggested she suspected there was more to the story, but she respectfully didn't press further. It's just, your lecture today on ethical dimensions of security technology seemed so informed by real-world application. It made me wonder about your background before academia. Elena regarded her thoughtfully. Aisha was perceptive and passionate about security ethics, qualities that reminded Elena of herself at a similar age, before field experience had added layers of complexity to her idealism. Theory is strengthened by practice, Aisha, she said finally. Perhaps we can discuss this more during our next thesis consultation. For now, I'd suggest focusing on the principles we covered today rather than their specific applications. Aisha nodded, accepting the gentle redirection. Before leaving, she added, whatever your involvement was yesterday, I'm glad they had someone with your insight available. My cousin works in that building. The simple statement struck Elena deeply. A reminder of the real human impact behind the technical and strategic considerations that had occupied her thoughts. This was why she had stepped forward despite her reservations, why she had agreed to consult with Brooks' task force, and why she would meet with Phoenix later today, despite the complications it might create. After Aisha left, Elena gathered her materials and headed to her office to prepare for her afternoon meeting with her former handler. She needed to review what she knew about Savoska's recent activities and formulate precise questions that might elicit useful information without compromising either Phoenix's operations or her own position with Brooks' task force. As she walked across the sunlit campus, Elena reflected on the parallel paths her life had taken. The public academic career built on sharing knowledge within ethical frameworks, and the shadowy past of field operations where those same ethical principles had sometimes been tested to their limits. The two worlds had remained separate for years, but now they were converging in ways she had not anticipated. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Rodriguez. Intelligence update available. Commander Brooks requests your review when convenient. Another thread pulling her back toward a world she had once left behind, another reminder that expertise, once demonstrated, rarely remains unnoticed or unsolicited for long. Elena glanced at her watch, calculating the time before her meeting with Phoenix. There would be just enough time to stop by task force headquarters first. She texted a brief acknowledgement to Rodriguez, then changed direction, heading toward the parking lot instead of her office. The academic papers could wait. Savoska and his bombs would not. The intelligence update at task force headquarters proved more concerning than Elena had anticipated. Surveillance of the warehouse complex had captured images of a man whose physical characteristics matched Anton Savoska, though facial recognition could not provide definitive confirmation due to the subject's careful avoidance of direct camera angles. More troubling were the shipments being delivered, specialized electronic components and chemical precursors that Elena recognized as essential elements for Savoska's signature explosive devices. "He's building something significant," Elena told Commander Brooks as they reviewed the footage together. "These aren't components for a simple device like what we saw at Meridian Tower. The quantity suggests something larger, possibly with multiple deployment mechanisms." Brooks's expression darkened. "A coordinated attack?" "Potentially," Elena confirmed. "Savoska typically tests his innovations with smaller devices before implementing them in larger operations. The Meridian Tower bombs may have been proof of concept for whatever he's planning now." Lieutenant Rodriguez joined them, bringing additional data from chemical supply monitoring systems. "We've tracked purchases of these compounds through 3 separate shell companies, all following similar patterns to what Dr. Kaminski identified yesterday." Elena studied the new information, her concern growing. "This timing accelerator he's using, it's a refinement of what we saw yesterday. He's improving the design, making it even more resistant to standard disarming procedures. Could you neutralize it?" Brooks asked directly. Elena met his gaze. "Possibly, but it would be better to prevent deployment entirely." Brooks nodded. "In agreement. We're preparing a tactical operation to secure the warehouse complex tonight. Based on your assessment of the intelligence, we believe we have probable cause for immediate intervention." Elena checked her watch, aware that her meeting with Phoenix was approaching. "I should review the operational plan before you proceed." Savoska is known for booby-trap contingencies, especially in his workspaces. "I was hoping you'd say that," Brooks admitted. "The tactical team is briefing in 30 minutes. Your input would be invaluable." Elena made a quick decision. "I can stay for the briefing, but I have an unavoidable appointment at 2. I'll provide what guidance I can before then." The tactical briefing was efficient but thorough. Elena highlighted potential danger points based on her knowledge of Savoska's methods, suggesting specific approaches to clearing different areas of the warehouse complex. The team leader, a veteran Special Forces operator named Major Daniels, listened attentively, incorporating her suggestions into the entry plan without the skepticism she might have faced days earlier. As the briefing concluded, Elena pulled Brooks aside. "Commander, there's something else you should know. I may have access to additional intelligence on Savoska from my previous work. I'm meeting a former colleague this afternoon who might provide relevant information." Brooks studied her with renewed interest. "From the International Security Consortium?" "I thought you said they don't track your activities." "They don't officially," Elena clarified. "But certain individuals maintain awareness of significant threats. Savoska has been on their radar for years. Would you be willing to share whatever you learn?" Brooks asked carefully, clearly recognizing the delicate territory they were entering. Elena considered her response. "To the extent that it doesn't compromise ongoing ISE operations, yes. My priority is preventing civilian casualties, regardless of institutional boundaries." Brooks seemed satisfied with this answer. "That's all I can ask. We'll proceed with the warehouse operation tonight. I'll have Rodriguez keep you updated on developments." Elena left headquarters with just enough time to reach her meeting with Phoenix. Rather than the secure communications facility she had expected, Phoenix had designated a public location, the Botanical Gardens at the edge of the university campus. It was a classic counterintelligence technique, meeting in an open public space with multiple sight lines and exit routes, where surveillance would be complicated by normal civilian traffic. Elena arrived early, taking a winding path through the Japanese garden section before settling on a bench near the koi pond. She appeared to be simply enjoying the afternoon sun, perhaps taking a break from academic duties, while her trained eyes continuously scanned her surroundings for familiar faces or suspicious movements. At precisely 2 p.m., a slender woman in her 50s approached, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Dr. Helena Vasquez, according to her university visitor badge, ostensibly a visiting professor from the International Policy Institute. To the casual observer, this appeared to be a simple meeting between academic colleagues. "The water lily are particularly beautiful this season," the woman remarked as she sat beside Elena, the practiced opening of their established recognition protocol. "Yes, but I've always preferred the lotus," Elena responded, completing the exchange. "Hello, Phoenix." Phoenix, whose real name Elena had never known, smiled slightly. "Whisper, it's been a while. You're looking well. Academia seems to agree with you." "Until recently it did," Elena acknowledged. "Now I find myself pulled back into familiar territory." Phoenix nodded, her expression turning serious. "Not by coincidence. Savoska's appearance in your city was deliberately orchestrated." This confirmation of Elena's suspicion sent a chill through her. "Explain." 3 months ago, ISC operations disrupted a major weapons tech transfer involving Savoska's network. We captured significant materials and personnel, but Savoska himself escaped. Intelligence indicated he was seeking revenge against specific individuals he holds responsible for the operation's failure. "And I'm on that list," Elena concluded, the pieces falling into place. "The Meridian Tower attack was likely meant to draw you out," Phoenix confirmed. The financial district targeting made little strategic sense for Savoska's usual clients, but it guaranteed major emergency response, media coverage, and the involvement of every available expert. Elena processed this information, rethinking everything about the Meridian Tower incident. "He used a device design I was known to have neutralized before." "Precisely. He wanted to ensure you would be consulted, that you would reveal yourself." Phoenix's expression conveyed the seriousness of the situation. "The question is why?" "Revenge is one possibility, but Savoska rarely acts on pure emotion. There's something else at play." "The warehouse operation," Elena realized suddenly. "Brooks is moving on it tonight. If Savoska anticipated this, if he wanted to draw out not just me but tactical response teams, it could be an elaborate trap," Phoenix finished her thought. "Savoska specializes in multi-stage planning. The Meridian Tower devices could have been stage 1. Identify and expose you. The warehouse could be stage 2. Eliminate you and anyone working with you." Elena stood abruptly. "I need to warn Brooks." Phoenix caught her arm. "Wait, there's more you need to know. Savoska isn't working alone. We have credible intelligence that he's been contracted by the Vanguard network." The name sent another, deeper chill through Elena. The Vanguard network was a shadowy collective of technology mercenaries who sold their services to the highest bidder, typically terrorist organizations or rogue states seeking advanced weapons capabilities. Their operations were sophisticated, well-funded, and nearly impossible to trace. "If Vanguard is involved, this goes far beyond personal revenge," Elena said, her mind racing through implications. "They wouldn't waste resources on a vendetta unless it served their larger objectives." "Exactly," Phoenix agreed. "We believe Savoska's devices are a testing phase for a new weapons system Vanguard is developing. Your city may be a proving ground." Elena checked her watch, calculating how quickly she could reach Brooks. "I need to get this information to the task force immediately. Tonight's operation needs to be reconsidered." "Be careful what you reveal," Phoenix cautioned. "If Vanguard has infiltrated local security, and they typically do, sharing too much could compromise both you and the ISC operations tracking them." Elena nodded, understanding the delicate balance required. "I'll focus on the immediate tactical concerns. What support can ISC provide if this escalates?" "I've already activated a containment team," Phoenix replied. "They're on standby but can deploy within 2 hours if necessary. Here's a secure contact protocol." She slipped a small device resembling a USB drive into Elena's hand. One time. Encryption key. Use it if standard channels are compromised. They parted ways casually, as if concluding a pleasant academic discussion. Elena walked briskly toward the parking lot, her mind methodically organizing what she could share with Brooks, without revealing classified ISC operations or sources. She was halfway to her car when her phone vibrated with an incoming call from Lieutenant Rodriguez. She answered immediately, sensing from the timing that something had changed. Dr. Kaminski. Rodriguez's voice was tense. The warehouse operation has been moved up. We've detected thermal signatures suggesting the suspects are preparing to relocate. Commander Brooks has authorized immediate intervention. Elena's pulse quickened. Lieutenant, tell Brooks to hold the operation. I have new intelligence suggesting a potential trap. Savoska may be anticipating your move. I'll relay the message immediately, Rodriguez promised. But the tactical team is already in final approach positions. Can you get to headquarters? Quickly? I'm on my way, Elena confirmed, breaking into a run toward her car. Have Brooks contact the tactical team leader directly. Tell them to maintain position, but not to breach until I arrive with updated intelligence. The drive to Task Force headquarters took 12 agonizing minutes, during which Elena's mind cycled through worst-case scenarios. If Savoska had indeed designed the warehouse as a trap, standard tactical approaches could lead to catastrophic casualties. The bomb maker's expertise in sequential triggers and cascading detonation systems made him particularly dangerous in prepared environments where he controlled the physical space. Elena rushed into the operations center to find Brooks in intense discussion with his senior staff. He looked up as she entered, immediately motioning her over. Dr. Kaminski, Rodriguez relayed your warning. The tactical team is holding position, but our surveillance indicates accelerating activity inside the warehouse. We may lose our window of opportunity. Commander, I have credible intelligence that Savoska anticipated your response, Elena stated firmly. The warehouse may be rigged, with a sophisticated trap system designed specifically to target tactical entry teams. Brooks studied her intently. Source of this intelligence? A former colleague from my IC days, Elena replied, careful not to mention Phoenix directly. Someone with extensive knowledge of Savoska's operations and current threat assessments. Brooks glanced at his team before responding. Dr. Kaminski, I need you to understand our position. We have confirmed the presence of explosive materials in that warehouse. We have visual identification of a subject matching Savoska's description. If we delay and those materials are moved to multiple locations, we could be facing a significantly worse scenario. I understand the urgency, Elena acknowledged. I'm not suggesting you abort the operation entirely, but the approach needs to be reconsidered. Savoska specializes in anticipating standard tactical entries and designing countermeasures specifically for first responders. Brooks gestured toward the surveillance feeds. What would you suggest instead? Elena studied the warehouse layout displayed on the screens. Your thermal imaging shows 6 heat signatures clustered in the main assembly area, correct? Confirmed, the surveillance technician responded. But your intelligence indicated a larger operation with at least 12 individuals, Elena continued. Where are the others? The question created a moment of uncomfortable silence as the implications sank in. They could be in areas shielded from thermal scanning, Rodriguez suggested. Or they've already left, taking key components with them, another analyst offered. Both possibilities concern me, Elena said. But there's a third option that concerns me more. What if they're not visible because they're no longer generating significant body heat? Brooks's expression darkened as he grasped her meaning. You think the heat signatures we're seeing could be decoys, Elena finished. Thermal devices designed to mimic human presence. It's a technique Savoska has used before to draw In tactical teams. The operations center fell silent as this possibility was considered. Brooks turned to his communications officer. "Get me Major Daniels on secure channel." When the tactical team leader responded, Brooks put the call on speaker. "Major, we have new intelligence suggesting the heat signatures you're observing may be decoys. Hold your position and prepare for alternative entry planning." "Sir," Daniels replied, his voice tense, "we're detecting movement toward the east." "Exit. If they're preparing to transport materials, we need to move now." Elena stepped closer to the speaker. "Major Daniels, this is Dr. Kaminski. The movement you're seeing could be automated or remotely triggered. Savoska is known for creating distractions to draw tactical teams into prepared kill zones." There was a brief pause before Daniels responded. "Dr. Kaminski, my team is trained for precisely these scenarios. We can adapt to countermeasures." "Not these countermeasures," Elena insisted. "Savoska designs specifically against standard tactical protocols. He studies first responder methodologies and builds his traps accordingly." Brooks made a decision. "Daniels, maintain perimeter containment, but do not breach. I'm sending Dr. Kaminski to your location to provide direct consultation before entry." The surprise was evident in Daniels' voice. "Sir, with respect, bringing a civilian consultant to an active tactical scene is highly irregular. So is facing a bomb maker who specifically designs devices to kill your entire team," Brooks replied firmly. "Dr. Kaminski has direct experience with Savoska's methodologies that none of us possess. Lieutenant Rodriguez will escort her to your position immediately." As Brooks ended the call, he turned to Elena. "I'm taking a significant professional risk sending you into this situation. I need to know you're certain about this assessment." Elena met his gaze directly. "Commander, when you dismissed my expertise at Meridian Tower, lives were placed at risk. Are you prepared to make the same mistake again?" The question hung in the air between them, a direct challenge to the professional respect he had claimed to develop for her judgment. After a moment, Brooks nodded. "Rodriguez, get Dr. Kaminski whatever protective gear she needs and transport her to the tactical staging area immediately." Within 20 minutes, Elena found herself approaching the warehouse perimeter in tactical gear that felt uncomfortably familiar, a reminder of the field operations she had believed were behind her. Lieutenant Rodriguez drove in silence, respecting her need to focus on the challenges ahead. At the staging area, Major Daniels greeted them with poorly disguised skepticism. "Dr. Kaminski, Commander Brooks speaks highly of your expertise, but I need to be clear. My team operates under strict tactical protocols that ensure their safety and effectiveness." "I understand, Major," Elena replied calmly, "and I respect your team's training and capabilities. But Savoska specifically designs his traps to exploit those protocols. May I see your current entry plan?" Reluctantly, Daniels showed her the tactical approach they had prepared, a standard, multi-point entry focusing on securing the main assembly area where the heat signatures were concentrated. Elena studied it briefly before looking up. "This is exactly what you would expect. Your primary and secondary entry points align with standard tactical doctrine." He would have anticipated this precise approach. "What would you suggest instead?" Daniels asked, his skepticism giving way to professional curiosity. Elena pointed to a seemingly unimportant maintenance access on the building schematics. "This utility corridor isn't on the original architectural plans. It was added during renovations 3 years ago. Savoska would focus his countermeasures on the obvious tactical entry points, potentially overlooking this access." Daniels studied the point she indicated. "That's a narrow approach with limited maneuverability. Not ideal for tactical movement. Precisely why he might not prioritize it for countermeasures," Elena explained. "Additionally, I want to verify those heat signatures before any team enters the building." "How?" Rodriguez asked. Elena considered the resources available. Do you have remote reconnaissance capabilities? Drones with specialized sensors? We have tactical surveillance drones, yes, Daniels confirmed. I need one equipped with multiple spectral imaging capabilities, Elena requested. Thermal is not sufficient. Savoska knows how to fool standard thermal. While the drone was being prepared, Elena continued analyzing the warehouse layout, identifying potential placement points for Savoska's signature traps based on her knowledge of his methodology. She marked these on the tactical map, explaining to Daniel's team the specific trigger mechanisms they might encounter. The drone operation confirmed Elena's suspicions. The heat signatures were indeed decoys, sophisticated devices designed to mimic human presence on standard thermal imaging. More concerning, the drone's chemical sensors detected trace elements consistent with Savoska's most dangerous explosive compounds throughout the main assembly area. The entire space is rigged, Elena told Daniels as they reviewed the drone. Footage. Standard entry would trigger a catastrophic detonation. Your entire team would have been lost. The realization sobered even the most skeptical members of the tactical unit. Daniels looked at Elena with new respect. How do you suggest we proceed, Doctor? We need to locate the master trigger mechanism before attempting any entry, Elena explained. Savoska typically centralizes his control systems, even in distributed devices. Based on the building's electrical layout and the drone readings, I believe it would be here. She indicated a small office space at the rear of the warehouse. That's outside our containment perimeter, Daniels noted with concern. If there are hostiles in that location, they could already be gone. Which may explain why your thermal imaging showed no signatures there, Elena agreed. We need to extend the perimeter immediately and approach this location with extreme caution. As Daniels reorganized his team to secure the expanded perimeter, Elena received an urgent call from Brooks at headquarters. We've intercepted fragments of encrypted communications from the warehouse vicinity, Brooks informed her. Our analysts believe someone triggered a remote evacuation protocol approximately 30 minutes ago, right when we detected the movement toward the east exit. They knew we were coming, Elena concluded. The entire setup was designed to detect and eliminate your tactical response. Savoska created an elaborate trap, then cleared out when surveillance was detected. If they've evacuated, should we stand down the operation? Brooks asked. Elena considered the situation carefully. No, we need to secure that warehouse and neutralize whatever devices Savoska left behind. But we need to do it methodically, with full awareness that everything inside is designed to kill whoever enters. With Daniel's reluctant agreement, Elena prepared to personally lead a small assessment team to locate and neutralize the master trigger mechanism before the main tactical force would enter. Despite her earlier insistence to Brooks that she was no longer a field operative, the current situation demanded her direct expertise to prevent casualties. As she checked her equipment, Lieutenant Rodriguez approached. Dr. Kaminski, I've been authorized to accompany your assessment team. Elena looked at him thoughtfully. You understand the risk? Rodriguez nodded. I do. But I also understand what happened at Meridian Tower. Your expertise saved lives then. I believe it will again today. Not everyone shared your confidence. Initially, Elena reminded him. No, Rodriguez acknowledged. But the best experts prove their value through actions, not credentials. You've done that, twice now. His words resonated with Elena as she completed her preparations. From civilian liability to essential expert in the space of just days, the transformation in how these professionals perceived her was striking. Yet she knew it wasn't about recognition or validation. It was about applying the right expertise at the critical moment, regardless of titles or appearances. As she led her small team toward the warehouse's utility access point, Elena reflected on Phoenix's warnings about Savoska's larger objectives. Neutralizing this trap was necessary, but insufficient. Somewhere in the city, Savoska was likely already preparing his next move, one that would be even more difficult to anticipate and counter. For now, though, Elena focused entirely on the immediate challenge, navigating the deadly environment Savoska had created, finding and disabling his master trigger mechanism, and ensuring that the professionals who had once dismissed her expertise would live to apply the lessons they had learned about looking beyond appearances and titles when lives were at stake. The utility corridor was exactly as narrow and confining as Major Daniels had warned. Elena led the way, moving with careful precision, each step measured and deliberate. Behind her, Lieutenant Rodriguez and 2 specialized EOD technicians followed. Her lead, maintaining radio silence as they penetrated deeper into the warehouse complex. The air grew stale, tinged with the acrid scent of industrial chemicals and something else, a faint, distinctive odor that Elena recognized immediately as a signature component in Savoska's explosive compounds. Hold! The team froze in position. Elena pointed to an almost invisible filament crossing the corridor at ankle height, a trigger wire that would have activated if any of them had continued forward. Perimeter alarm, not designed to kill, just to alert. He left early warning. Systems even in this access point. Rodriguez nodded, impressed by her ability to spot what his trained eyes had missed in the dim light. Elena carefully extracted a specialized tool from her kit, one she had specifically requested before entering the building. With practiced movements, she neutralized the trigger mechanism without setting it off. How did you know to look for that specific trigger type? Because I've dismantled 37 of Savoska's devices over the years. He evolves his methods, but certain patterns remain consistent. He favors this particular trigger design for peripheral warnings, sophisticated enough to be reliable, but simple enough to deploy quickly. They reached a junction where the utility corridor intersected with the main building's internal structure. Elena paused, consulting the building schematic displayed on her tablet. The small office she had identified as the likely location of the master trigger mechanism was approximately 50 meters ahead, but reaching it would require crossing through areas of the warehouse that the drone had identified as heavily rigged with explosive compounds. We need to move through the storage section. Stay exactly in my footsteps. Savoska typically leaves narrow safe paths through his trigger fields, channels that his own people use when setting up or maintaining the devices. How can you identify these safe paths? The drone imagery showed subtle patterns in the dust, distribution on the floor. Areas with multiple footprints and precise lines indicate repeated safe passage. The trigger mechanisms would be placed to either side of these paths. Elena led them forward with meticulous care, occasionally stopping to point out nearly invisible tripwires or pressure-sensitive floor panels that bordered their narrow safe route. The EOD technicians exchanged glances of growing respect as she identified threat after threat that they might have missed without her guidance. After 20 tense minutes of careful progress, they reached the office area Elena had identified. The door was ajar, another warning sign that raised Elena's suspicions. Savoska never left important access points unsecured unless they were specifically designed as lures. This entry is compromised. We need to find another way in. She studied the office layout on her tablet, identifying a ceiling access point that connected to the building's ventilation system. There, that vent duct runs directly into the office. It's too small for standard tactical entry, which means Savoska likely paid less attention to securing it. Rodriguez looked skeptical. That's a tight fit even for maintenance personnel. I can make it. I need to assess the trigger mechanism before bringing in the rest of the team anyway. Dr. Kaminski, Commander Brooks authorized you as a consultant, not as the primary entry operative. This level of direct involvement exceeds the parameters of standard protocol. Just like at Meridian Tower. Lieutenant, we both know there's no one more qualified to identify and neutralize Savoska's master trigger. Every minute we delay increases The risk that some automated system will activate the devices. Rodriguez held her gaze for a long moment, before nodding reluctantly. What do you need from us? Secure this position and be ready to provide assistance when I call for it. If I don't make contact within 15 minutes, withdraw to minimum safe distance and call in Brooks' containment team. With the help of the EOD technicians, Elena accessed the ventilation duct and began the cramped journey toward the office. The confined space triggered unwelcome memories of her last field operation against Savoska, a mission in Eastern Europe that had ended with her trapped in a collapsed building after one of his devices detonated prematurely. She pushed the memories aside, focusing entirely on the present challenge. The vent opened into the ceiling of the office, providing Elena with a perfect overhead view before she made her entry. The space appeared empty of personnel, but her trained eye immediately identified the control system positioned on the central desk, a complex array of electronics connected to what appeared to be a standard laptop computer. This was classic Savoska, sophisticated destructive capability controlled through deceptively ordinary-looking technology. Elena carefully removed the vent cover and lowered herself into the office, scanning continuously for additional triggers or surveillance systems. The office was deliberately Spartan: a desk, 2 chairs, the control system, and a filing cabinet. No personal items, no identifying materials. Savoska maintained operational discipline, even in temporary locations. Approaching the control system with extreme caution, Elena examined it without touching any components. The configuration was more advanced than anything she had seen from Savoska previously, suggesting significant evolution in his technical capabilities. The laptop appeared to be running a countdown sequence, 47 minutes remaining until some automated protocol would execute. Elena activated her COM unit. Rodriguez, I've located the control system. It's on active countdown, likely programmed to trigger the distributed devices if evacuation procedures weren't properly completed. I need the EOD technical kit we prepared. Understood. Sending Specialist Cooper to your location with the equipment. How long will neutralization require? Elena studied the system's complexity. At least 30 minutes. This is a new configuration, with redundant trigger pathways. I need to map the entire system before attempting any disruption. While waiting for the equipment, Elena began documenting the control system's architecture, photographing key components and connections. The sophistication suggested resources beyond what Savoska typically had access to, confirming Phoenix's intelligence about Vanguard network involvement. This wasn't just a bomb maker's revenge plot, it was a field test for advanced weapons. Technology. Specialist Cooper arrived with the technical kit, his expression revealing momentary surprise at seeing Elena already deep into analysis of the system. Like many on the tactical team, he had likely expected a consultant who would direct from a distance rather than personally engage with the threat. Dr. Kaminski, I'm certified in advanced E-80 electronics. How can I assist? Elena appreciated his professional approach. No questioning of her authority or capability, just a straightforward offer of skilled support. I need continuity testing on these circuit pathways. We need to identify which are primary triggers and which are decoys before attempting any disruption. They worked in focused silence for several minutes, mapping the complex web of triggers and countermeasures Savoska had built into his control system. The countdown continued its steady progression. 42 minutes, 41, 40. This is definitely Vanguard technology. Savoska couldn't have developed this independently. The integration of biological detection sensors with the trigger mechanisms is beyond his known capabilities. Biological sensors? The system is designed to detect specific biological signatures, likely heartbeat, patterns and respiratory markers of tactical team members. It's programmed to differentiate between Savoska's own people and potential hostiles. That's why the safe paths work for his team, but would be deadly for standard tactical entry. The implications were chilling. This wasn't just a deadly trap. It was an intelligent weapon system capable of target discrimination and autonomous operation. If Vanguard was perfecting such technology for wider deployment, the threat extended far beyond this warehouse. Elena's CUM unit activated with an urgent message from Rodriguez. "Dr. Kaminski, we have movement outside the warehouse perimeter. Thermal imaging shows multiple vehicles approaching from the north access road. This may be Savoska returning to check his trap." The development complicated an already precarious situation. Elena made a quick decision. "Maintain your position, Lieutenant. Cooper and I will accelerate the neutralization process. Alert Major Daniels to prepare for possible hostile contact, but emphasize that no one enters this building until we've disabled the master trigger." With renewed urgency, Elena and Cooper worked to isolate the primary trigger pathways from the redundant systems. The task required exceptional precision. One wrong disconnection could trigger immediate detonation. Elena's hands moved with practiced confidence, her mind completely focused despite the pressure of the countdown and the approaching threat. "I've identified the primary power coupling," Elena announced after several tense minutes. "It's connected to a biometric lock, likely keyed to Savoska himself. We can't disable it directly without triggering the failsafe." "Options?" Cooper asked, professional and direct. Elena considered the system architecture they had mapped. "We need to create a power interruption that the system will interpret as a normal fluctuation rather than an attack. I can code a bypass that simulates Savoska's biometric signature long enough to access the underlying command structure." Cooper looked impressed. "That's well beyond standard EOD capabilities, Doctor. My expertise with Savoska's work isn't limited to physical disarming," Elena explained as she connected her specialized tools to the system. "Understanding his programming logic is equally important." For the next 20 minutes, Elena worked with intense concentration, writing code sequences that would fool the security protocols while gradually assuming control of the trigger mechanisms. Cooper provided essential support, maintaining the delicate electronic connections that allowed her to access the system without triggering its defensive measures. Outside, the situation was escalating. Rodriguez reported that the approaching vehicles had stopped just beyond the perimeter, with occupants maintaining position but not advancing. They appear to be conducting surveillance, possibly assessing whether their trap was successful. "They're waiting for detonation," Elena realized. The countdown isn't just a failsafe. It's when they expect their trap to eliminate the tactical team. "Keep your people out of sight, Lieutenant. Let them believe their plan is proceeding." The strategy bought them precious time as Elena continued her meticulous work. The countdown reached 15 minutes when she finally accessed the core command structure. "I've got it," she told Cooper with quiet satisfaction. "Now we can gradually assume control without triggering the failsafe protocols." Step by step, Elena disabled the distributed trigger mechanisms throughout the warehouse, routing their control signals through her bypass system. Each successful disconnection reduced the potential devastation if the master system activated. Cooper watched her work with undisguised admiration, recognizing expertise that far exceeded typical EOD training. "Where did you learn these techniques, Dr. Kaminski?" he asked as they approached the final phase of neutralization. Elena's focus remained on her work as she replied, "Some skills you learn in training. Others you develop when your life depends on finding solutions no one taught you. Savoska and I have a long history. Each time I've encountered his work, I've had to evolve my approach just as he evolves his designs." With 3 minutes remaining on the countdown, Elena completed the key final bypass sequence. The system continued its countdown, but the trigger pathways had been redirected to a controlled circuit that would register as a successful activation without actually detonating the distributed devices. "It's done," she informed Rodriguez. "The trigger system thinks it's still operational, but the actual detonation pathways have been severed. We can now safely neutralize the explosive compounds throughout the building. Outstanding work, Doctor, Rodriguez replied, relief evident in his voice. Major Daniels is coordinating with Commander Brooks on how to handle the surveillance team outside the perimeter. Tell them to maintain position, Elena advised. Let the countdown complete. When nothing happens, Savoska's people will likely approach to investigate the malfunction. That's our opportunity to apprehend them. The strategy proved sound. As the countdown reached 0, a tense silence filled the warehouse. The control system displayed what appeared to be successful activation, but the deadly devices remained inert. Outside, the surveillance team waited several minutes before cautiously approaching the building to investigate the apparent failure. They walked directly into the containment team Major Daniels had strategically positioned around the perimeter. 3 suspects were apprehended without incident, mid-level operatives rather than Savoska himself, but valuable intelligence assets. Nonetheless, as Elena emerged from the warehouse with Cooper, the assembled tactical team regarded her with expressions ranging from respect to awe. Major Daniels approached directly, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by professional appreciation. Dr. Kaminski, he acknowledged, extending his hand. Your assessment and neutralization of that trigger system saved my entire team. We would have walked right into that trap following standard protocols. Elena accepted his handshake with a simple nod. Your team's skills would have been valuable in any standard scenario, Major. Savoska specifically designs against standard approaches. That's why diverse expertise is essential in counter-terrorism operations. Commander Brooks arrived at the scene as the EOD team began the methodical process of securing and removing the distributed explosive devices. He found Elena reviewing data extracted from the control system with Lieutenant Rodriguez. Dr. Kaminski. Brooks greeted her, taking in her dust-covered tactical gear and focused expression. Lieutenant Rodriguez informed me of your direct role in neutralizing the trigger mechanism. That exceeded the advisory capacity we had discussed. Elena met his gaze steadily. It did. Would you have preferred I maintain protocol while your tactical team faced a threat they weren't equipped to identify? Brooks held her gaze for a moment before his expression softened into something approaching respect. No, results matter more than protocols when lives are at stake. Your actions today saved my people and secured a significant intelligence victory. Not a complete victory, Elena noted, returning her attention to the extracted data. Savoska isn't among those apprehended, and this control system contains references to additional devices already deployed elsewhere in the city. Brooks's expression darkened. How certain are you of this assessment? The programming includes network connections to what appear to be 3 additional control nodes, Elena explained, showing him the technical evidence. Based on Savoska's established patterns, these would be secondary devices positioned at high-value targets. The immediate tactical success suddenly felt incomplete, the beginning of a larger challenge rather than a resolution. Brooks immediately contacted headquarters, initiating emergency protocols to identify and secure potential target locations based on the new intelligence. As the operation transitioned from the warehouse to a broader citywide threat assessment, Elena found herself at the center of the task force's response planning. The team that had initially dismissed her as a civilian liability now looked to her expertise as their primary advantage against Savoska's evolving threat. In the tactical command vehicle, Elena worked alongside intelligence analysts to identify likely targets based on the fragmented data recovered from the control system. Her knowledge of Savoska's methodology provided critical context for interpreting the technical information. He typically selects targets with both symbolic significance and practical impact, she explained to the assembled team. Infrastructure that affects large populations, but also carries emotional or psychological weight. The Meridian Tower devices followed this pattern, Financial district targeting would disrupt economic activity while generating significant public fear. The intelligence team cross-referenced her assessment with the partial location data from the control system, gradually narrowing potential targets to 3 possibilities: the city's main water treatment facility, the regional power distribution center, and the central transportation hub. All 3 align with Savoska's targeting patterns, Elena noted. But with Vanguard backing, he has resources to strike all simultaneously. We need to deploy containment teams to each location immediately. Brooks, monitoring the analysis remotely from headquarters, made the decision to split their resources across all 3 potential targets. Dr. Kaminski, which location would you assess as the highest priority based on your knowledge of Savoska's methods? The question acknowledged her expertise in a way that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Elena considered the options carefully, weighing technical factors against her understanding of Savoska's psychological patterns. The transportation hub, she concluded. It offers the highest civilian concentration and would create cascading disruptions across multiple systems. It's also the most visible target for media coverage, which aligns with Vanguard's typical objectives of maximum psychological impact. Understood, Brooks acknowledged. I'm deploying our primary response team to the transportation hub with you as the lead technical advisor. Rodriguez will coordinate with you directly. As preparations for the multi-site response accelerated, Elena received an encrypted message on the secure device Phoenix had provided earlier. The message was typically concise. Vanguard primary operative identified, entering Central Transit Hub 20 minutes ago. ISC team en route. Extreme caution advised, Savoska personally on site. The confirmation of her target assessment provided grim satisfaction. Elena immediately shared the intelligence with Brooks, carefully framing it as information from her IC contact without revealing Phoenix's specific identity or the extent of ISC operations. Brooks processed the information quickly. This confirms your analysis. I'm upgrading the transportation hub response to maximum priority. The tactical team will stage for entry within 30 minutes. Savoska will anticipate that timeline. Elena warned. Standard response protocols are precisely what he's counting on. We need to adjust our approach. What do you suggest? Brooks asked, no trace of his earlier skepticism remaining. Let me enter first, alone, through auxiliary service access, Elena proposed. Savoska knows tactical teams, but has a blind spot regarding individual operators he considers inferior. As a woman and academic, I fit his profile of non-threats. Brooks immediately objected. Absolutely not. You've already exceeded advisory parameters today. Sending you in alone against Savoska himself goes against every protocol we have. Commander, Elena replied calmly, how many of Savoska's devices has anyone on your team personally neutralized? The question hung in the air, unanswerable, because they both knew the answer was none. And how many have I neutralized? She continued. According to your statement, 37, Brooks acknowledged reluctantly. 39 now, Elena corrected. Commander, expertise isn't measured by protocol adherence or position in a hierarchy. It's measured by demonstrated capability. Under actual conditions, your tactical teams are exceptionally trained for standard threats. Savoska is not standard, and Vanguard technology exceeds your team's experience parameters. This isn't about jurisdiction or authority, it's about applying the right expertise at the critical moment. Their gazes locked in silent confrontation, institutional protocol versus pragmatic necessity. After several tense seconds, Brooks made his decision. You'll have communication support and a tactical team in immediate reserve, he stated firmly. First sign of direct threat, they extract you immediately. This isn't a negotiable point, Dr. Kaminski. Elena nodded, accepting the reasonable compromise. Understood, Commander. Thank you for your trust. It's not about trust, Brooks clarified. It's about recognizing when expertise trumps protocol. Don't make me regret this decision. As the response teams deployed to their assigned locations, Elena prepared for what she knew would be a direct confrontation with Anton Savoska, the bomb maker whose devices she had been neutralizing for years, but whom she had never faced personally. The prospect should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a calm clarity that came from absolute certainty in her purpose and capabilities. Lieutenant Rodriguez approached as she checked her equipment one final time. "Dr. Kaminski, I've been assigned as your direct communication support. The tactical team will maintain position exactly as you and Commander Brooks agreed." Elena nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Your support at Meridian Tower made today's operation possible. Not many officers would have advocated for an unknown civilian consultant against their commander's initial judgment." Rodriguez smiled slightly. "I recognized expertise when I saw it, Doctor. That's not as common as it should be in our profession. Too often we confuse authority with capability." "A distinction Savoska is counting on," Elena noted. "His entire methodology exploits institutional blindness to unconventional expertise." As they approached the transportation hub, Elena focused her mind on the challenge ahead. Somewhere in the sprawling complex, Savoska was implementing the next phase of whatever Vanguard had commissioned him to test. Lives depended on her ability to anticipate his methods and counter them before he could complete his objective. From civilian liability to last hope in the span of 3 days, the transformation in how these professionals perceived her expertise was striking. But Elena knew the real measure of expertise wasn't in recognition or titles. It was in the moment when specialized met critical need, regardless of who possessed that knowledge or how they had acquired it. As she prepared to enter the transportation hub alone, Elena carried with her not just her technical skills and experience, but the weight of an essential truth she had demonstrated repeatedly over the past days. True expertise reveals itself through action, not credentials, and recognizing it, regardless of its source, can mean the difference between disaster and salvation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.